Hi everyone, welcome to the second ever Amos product call. My name is Dominic Timel. I'm a founder and contributor at the Salvia Foundation, and we have gathered here today to discuss the specification of the Amos product. So let me start by giving a few sentences recap of what Amos is. Amos is our project of making a search engine for learning resources. We'll use information provided by users, by volunteers, by contributors, to give people the best learning paths for anything that they want to learn. We call that information metadata, and in phase one, we only enable adding these metadata, essentially categorizing and structuring all of these online learning resources. And in the future, we'll also enable search. Now, in the first call, we discussed that the knowledge tree is essentially a tree. And we also discussed a little bit about the depths of the leaf nodes and how you can recursively calculate the depths of the other nodes merely by adding up all the depths of the child nodes. And here I'd like to also propose that the resource graph will be a forest. That's essentially a bunch of trees. We could, in theory, link all the trees up to a single node just to make it a tree, but the only reason I say that is that a forest and a tree are pretty much functionally equivalent. Cool. So I'd like to start with the actual set of metadata, and then we'll continue to the game theoretical model of how everything will work. So let's start with metadata. So this is definitely not a comprehensive or like a final list, but I did try to think a little bit about how everything can work. So a resource has a type. That can either be an explanation, or this could also be called a lecture, or presentation of theory, of examples. It can be a bunch of exercises, and exercises also include subtrees for hints and for solutions. Or it can be a Q&A place, such as Stack Exchange or the Khan Academy video pages. They also have a forum functionality. Or it can be a place to ask questions. Usually these two will actually go together. It will not be a closed forum, but you will also be able to ask questions. And then obviously we could add other ones, like a place where you can meet people, whether online or physically, to learn about this stuff or study together. And since the resources are essentially nodes in a tree, only the leaf nodes can have just one of these things. So the higher level nodes, they can include multiple ones. The leaf nodes can only include one. All of these things also have a quality from 0 to 5. I'm thinking since learning resources tend to have on average better quality than, for example, services like hotels or Airbnbs or whatever. And the reason is because much more can go wrong, and much more oftentimes goes wrong in everyday customer service and service-based services, provider-based services, that I think it makes sense to shift the scale a little bit. So good or okay won't be 3, but it will be 1. So I think a good human language translation would be 5 is amazing, 4 is excellent or really, really good, 3 is great, 2 is good, 1 is okay, and 0 is bad. So we could, for example, on the front end, this is just an idea, first ask the question, would you recommend this resource? And thumbs down would be a value of 0, or like an unhappy face would be value of 0, straight line face would be value of 1, and then if the user clicks happy face, he can then attach an adjective to his experience. Good, great, excellent, incredible. For explanation, the quality is, the quality of the explanation, obviously. For Q&A, it's the quality of the set of questions and the set of answers. And for the possibility to ask questions, would be the responsiveness and general average quality of the answers that you get. So that's like the quality criterion for a forum. I think we should also include another field, which I call notation. And notation will be what mathematical or physical or computing notation the resource uses. Now, there's something which I haven't really thought of a name for, but it's just a triplet. And it's the format, how you can acquire it, whether it's free, paid, or through a subscription, as well as the country restrictions. And every one of these triplets has links, essentially. So the reason I decided to propose it this way is, well, the first thing I thought was, okay, so some resources, they're available in both video, audio, and text. If you think of a podcast, that podcast might have a YouTube video recording. It might have, an iTunes link, and it might also have a transcript. And then I thought, okay, now some resources might be available free. There might be a different version that's paid or through a subscription, right? But then, for example, when it comes to, like, by subscription, I mean like Amazon Kindle subscription, Amazon Prime subscription, Audible subscription possibly, but that's kind of different, Netflix. And then I thought, there might be country restrictions. So like this, Netflix originals are available in every single country that Netflix operates in, but not all of Netflix library is available in every single country that Netflix operates in. And so we would have different links, possibly different links, depending on the format and the country requirements and the type of access. This is just an idea, and like kind of this needs to be fleshed out through iteration. A lot of these things, it's quite hard to pre-plan, but at the same time, we need at least some plan before and the closer we can get to the final version, the less work later on. So yeah, that's how it is currently. And each of these triplets will have a direct link, which can be a main link, as well as possibly other links. And also a download link, which, it can be, again, a main link and possibly other links. These sort of lists of links allow us to put equivalence relations in our model between the links. For example, the same resource, the same blog article could be available on medium.com or on another blog. And each of these links has a source, which is kind of a variant, and it can either be like same as the parent, it can be like in the app itself. So like, for example, let's say you have an app that doesn't really like conform to URL queries, but still in that app, it's possible to discover a really, really good learning resource. So then you might write that the link, or I should say the source, is in app, and then you might write, let's say, a human language, or this is not decided yet, some form of how to access that. And finally, the one I already mentioned is link, which includes a URL. And since like the model that I'm showing you guys, it's sort of both for like the leaf nodes, the like final resources, as well as the non-leaf nodes, which are like collections of resources. Then for a lot of these things, you can also inherit from the parent. So an example where you might want to do that would be for the notation. Let's say you have an Oxford Maths course, and that Maths course has lecture notes, which have 7 sections. And there are also 2 problem sheets, each of which have 10 questions. So for all of these, in the future, something like 30 resources that this might give rise to, you would be able to, with one click, inherit from the parent node the mathematical notation. The reason that this notation is a thing is because we could also like either allow users to like, it would give them preference to what they already sort of are used to when it comes to mathematical notation, or we could like give them a warning that this one uses different notation than you're used to. And it's essentially like the one of the reasons it's here is it's to abstract away dependencies on previous resources. So we don't really want to be saying this section of the lecture notes requires the previous section. What we want to be saying is this section of lecture notes requires a particular topic, and also it has some notation. These 2 things together, I think, abstract away the need to learn that topic with that particular previous resource. Next, we have explanation exercises. I mean, for now, let's just focus on explanation because like we already have quite a big job in front of us, and obviously this is a very iterative project that might take a year or even more to find the specification that actually is the ideal one. But like for now, the way I see it is exercises have sort of, if you're familiar, if you know some logic, it's called the DNF, the disjunctive normal form, which is essentially an OR of ANDs. So, and they have that for topics and for learning dependency. So what does that actually like mean? So that means that for an exercise, like a mathematical problem, there can be different ways to solve it. And depending on which way you're solving it, it might have a different learning dependency. And therefore it might also cover a different topic. It might, if this problem can be solved either using the Euler line, or it can be solved using, similarities of triangles or cyclic quadrilaterals or whatnot, well, then it will require either Euler line or cyclic quads, and it will advance your knowledge in either Euler line or cyclic quads. But for explanations, like I've thought about it a little bit, but I still think that like an and relationship is sufficient. And there was also an idea of having topics also have strength. So you would say this particular thing increases your knowledge of a topic, from 3 to 4. but I think that's not necessary. I think topics should only have, uh, yeah, topics should only be, should only have topics. When it comes to learning dependencies, on the other hand, we do need some notion of how much you have to know of the other thing or how recommended it is to know the other thing. And as we discussed in the last call, we're joining those two numbers together. In the last call, we had a very clumsy name for it, required level at 3. That name is not only clumsy, it doesn't make sense because we're not actually requiring at some level at 3. So a much better name would be the recommended level. Why recommended? Because at level 3, the human translation is recommended. So so this number represents what a level or depth, it could also be recommended depth or level, you recommend the user has. So if you recommend a really high one, then it will extrapolate on unit scale that it's necessary to have at least a little bit. It's recommended to have a lot, and it will be good if you are an expert. If you put a low recommended level, then it will extrapolate that it's not necessary to know anything. It's recommended to know a little bit, and it will be good if you knew a lot. So I think this, like, again, this will all depend on iteration if our users like the results we're showing them. But I think this unit scale extrapolation with a fixed gradient of 1/1 is absolutely sufficient. So yeah, that's the learning dependency. It's a tuple of a topic and a recommended level. So yeah, I wrote this stuff in like 1 hour, so it's just to serve as a basis for our thinking. But I have no doubt that a lot of this stuff can get improved. Now let's talk about the community model. Now there's two concepts that I'd like to discuss. The first one is blockchain transition. So Saudio started with this vision. Our first tagline was creating a decentralized education system, and actually it even is our tagline right now, even though we're thinking of changing it. And so one of our kind of key plans from the very beginning was to open up our API or even database, or even allow like rights to our database as much as possible. Right now, distributed peer-to-peer databases, such as blockchains, but other ones, are not at a scalability level where we would be able to make use of them. But that doesn't mean that in 3 years, something like GunDB, OrbitDB, Secure Scuttlebutt, and BigChainDB cannot make it to the level where we can transition and fully release control of the system. I think it's really good timing because right now we don't have the specs. We haven't iterated yet, and number two, it's not technically ready. But in 2 years, we might have it be technically ready, and we also might be able to sort of have a much more structured version that we're much more certain about. And so I think with that in mind, we should try to emulate the blockchain world as much as possible. So number one, the advantage is, as I already mentioned, it will make the future transition easier. But I think that blockchain characteristics are by themselves extremely advantages. And the three main advantageous points are sort of durability, I would say, in that it's not the foundation that is making decisions about how this system gets run, but it's the community. Um, the other one would be just better decisions. Well, I guess that's the same as the first one. But the second one would be also like costs for the company. So as you guys very well know, big companies like Airbnb, and the other day I was reading about Fitbit actually. They employ or Facebook, they employ thousands of people to do all this customer support, flagging inappropriate items, categorizing, moderation. It can be really, really costly to the company during scaling. If we're able to just come up with a system that incentivizes people to cooperate and essentially collaborate and really coordinate in a way that makes our end vision still come true, that would be really, really cool. And the third reason, so we have durability, we have cost effectiveness, and the third reason is trust. Good contracts make good friends, and if we are able to show the community and the world that we do not have power, that they do not have to rely on us, then that is more likely to increase, the trust in the system, and therefore increase their chances of contributions, of joining the movement, of donating or investing money, etc. So I think these are three really important reasons. As such, we have to find a way how to get this real world information, which is the contents for the metadata about those resources, into our system. Now, I'm happy to listen to suggestions, both now and anytime in the future. But me personally, having been in the blockchain world, I believe there's not that many solutions. There is something called the shilling game, which I'll get to in a second. There are also things called subjective vocracy and a few other ones. But it seems to me the industry standard, at least in the blockchain world, is a shilling game. With that in mind, I'd like to introduce to you the Amos game. So the reason I call it the Amos game is because I think the shilling game, like initially it was just a very, very simple game. Like you and somebody else are walking across the street and you're walking towards each other and you're both going to crash either if you don't take any decision or if you both pick like opposite decisions from your perspective viewpoints. And so what position, what direction are you both going to take? Well, the Schelling point in a country like India would be to both go left. The Schelling point in a country like the Czech Republic would be to both go right. So that was originally the idea of a Schelling game. It's been kind of, the name has been sort of reapplied to this blockchain Schelling game concept. So I don't want to like reapply it again because I feel like it's losing its initial meaning. So with that in mind, here's the Amos game. So, and a finite Amos game is, it's time constrained. It ends in 3 days or 7 days. And then there's an unlimited one, which never ends. Now, here's the second concept that I wanted to discuss. I told you about why we want to go the blockchain direction, at least like from some perspectives. Now, here's the second concept I wanted to discuss. Oh yeah, should we allow users to be slashed in reputation? In other words, should we allow decreasing or only increasing of reputation? Now, it's pretty clear that only increasing has technical advantages, because if you can only increase something, it's essentially not a currency. You don't have the double spending problem, and therefore you need much weaker guarantees about your database layer. I believe this is called eventual consistency in academia. When you are allowed to decrease your balance, such as with a currency, but even possibly with an app-based reputation, then that leads to a problem called the double spending problem. And to solve that, you need much stronger requirements from your database layer. And I believe in academia, this is called strong consistency. So essentially what I'm trying to say is this model that I wrote up here in the last few hours, I'm trying to think of a way that you can only increase it. I'm not saying it will work, and there's more thinking and also experimentation to be done whether this actually works. So that also, what I just said, it also informs the discussion about the Amos game. So unlike the shelling game, where you make a deposit, a stake, and after the time expires, you can lose it. In our game, there's no stake. So for the finite one, you're betting on a set of discrete options, and whichever one gets the most, let's say all the winners get some minted reputation. And in the unlimited one, it can, for example, work like this. Let's say you submit something, and let's say somebody comes up with a reputation of 2 and confirms or consigns your submission. So anywhere between 1 and 9 reputation points after you get 1 reputation point more. 10 to 99, you get 2, and it grows on a log-based scale. So this is actually very, very interesting, because if you think about it, at least in some naive way, the incentives should match. If I am submitting metadata about a resource, I am incentivized to pick the sweet spot, because that's the one that everyone else will pick, because that's the shelling point. And if I pick the sweet spot, then I will be able to get a lot of reputation, because everyone else will be picking that sweet spot after me. It also has a beautifully multi-level marketing slash equity model built into it, which is that you get more reputation if you're the first one than if you're the last one. So it has this sort of just like cryptocurrencies or whatever, has this beautiful model of incentivizing early adopters built in. I guess so. Okay, so that's sort of the concepts that I wanted to discuss. So now let's go back to the beginning of the discussion. So initially, the idea was that we allow sort of users to register, and if they do, they have a reputation of 1. But then I realized this is deeply incompatible with the blockchain world, which we want to try to be as close to based on the discussion a few minutes ago. So why don't we try a model where registered users have actually a reputation of 0? And this is a little bit off topic, but also I'm gonna discuss it. So in our model, actually, you don't have to be a registered user. You can also make what are called IP contributions based on your IP address only, those are very likely to be less, not more, anonymous than setting up an account. And the reason is your IP address will be you know either public to the actual public, or at least in our database, and therefore it will be possible to possibly pinpoint your location or whatnot. In any case, this is also possible. Now, what can users with reputation 0 do? They can only submit new information. And then there's another option which I would have to think about. This is an open question. Whether they should be allowed to also vote on the metadata content that other people have submitted, and hence gain reputation that way. Let me write that as an open question so we don't forget. Maybe I can write it over here. Gain rep from voting. In either case, reputation for 0 users can always be gotten, obviously, after their submissions. Once people start agreeing with them, then they will start getting reputation. So yeah, let's go over here. For any resource, registered users can vote with their reputation. Now, what can they vote on? So either they can say, so a reputation is, a resource is defined by its link, in most cases, a URL. So they can either vote that the link is against the content standards. For example, if it's something that is not appropriate for whatever reason. They can also vote that the link does not represent a learning resource. They can also vote that whatever the user submitted is for like what I call a variant field. So, a variant, I use the reason ML term. You could also think of it as a struct or an enum in programming languages other than reason. If you're a mathematician, you can think of it as an unordered mathematical set. And so an example of that would be notation or the type of the resource, etc. And so they can vote that it's the same or it's different. Or, of course, they can add it if it hasn't been added, because we don't require users to fill in all of the data that they're submitting. Partial ones are also okay. But they can also vote the same value or different value for what I call the unit scale field. So that would be like the recommended level for the dependencies. And I think that with this model that I've discussed for using this Amos game to get these metadata content, there's 2 challenges with it. So the first challenge that I see is, how do you bootstrap reputation? If we all start off with reputation 0, and the only way to get reputation is by, reputable people voting that you did something correctly, well then we'll be stuck in an infinite loop of 0 reputations. So this could be solved. Not that difficult. We could just give the first 4 users, or the first 1 user, the first user of our app, we could give them 1 reputation point, and somebody else submits something, they vote that it's correct, and bam, now that second user has a reputation point. And by induction, this can be repeated ad infinitum, and we'll be able to bootstrap reputation. So let me write that here. That's one challenge, is how do you bootstrap reputation. There's actually one more challenge, which is, remember I said the word ad infinitum? That's exactly the problem. So let's say, we have an honest set of 1,000 users, but there is one malicious one. That malicious user could now technically, not assuming some UX sort of obstacles, but like on a purely game theoretical level, they could create 1,000 user accounts, and they could submit spam with the first one, and then with their malicious account, they could confirm it, and bam. Now their spam account number one has a reputation of 1. And then with the second one, they could also create some spam, or they could vote on the same topic. And essentially, they would be able to get an arbitrary amount of reputation, even though they're actually an arbitrary amount of reputation from actually just having a single reputation point, even though they're all actually scammers. So that's a big challenge, and this challenge is based on the fact that there's sort of what you might call in this model the nothing at stake problem. You're not staking any reputation when you do the votes. And so again, there's one way to solve it, which is allow staking of reputation, i.e. allow reputation to be decreased, i.e. require a strongly consistent database. But I think that this could be done with a small hack, which is have some sort of either built-in or manual mechanism whereby if a user is submitting false or scammy content, either because it's not against content standards or because it's not a learning resource, or they have just missed out the variant field many times, or they completely missed out the unit scale. Like they thought it was a recommended level of 1, but actually it was like 5 multiple times. Then they will be able to get blocked. And this would be done automatically. So yeah, we could also have like another sort of value or variable, which would be like, could be called warnings. And if warnings ever reaches 5, you get blocked. Yeah, that could work, possibly. Unless there's like unless the user is able to generate a lot of accounts in a very short time span and get a lot of reputation for them before it is found out that he's a scammer. In which case we might have to go retroactively, and once somebody is denoted as a spammer, then actually sort of change all of the things that happened there ever since that first spam. But I feel like that would be really, really hard on the database. Imagine like going back 2 days and like changing everything as if those 1,000 spam accounts never existed. So essentially, this could all be summarized as the Sybil attack. And yeah, we have to think about this. To summarize, I see 2 solutions. Either have staking of reputation, which I don't really like because it increases complexity, not just on the database layer, but also on the UIs/UX layer. and possibly even like other layers. But then there's the other option, which is allow the blocking, and I mean that also has some challenges, which is like, what if the user is able to do a lot of damage before he or she is blocked? I guess one thing that we could do is like these points would be applied only after some time that the user has, like what I'm trying to say is we could add like a time lag of like, let's say 1 day before anything is submitted to the database and before it gets applied. So then there will be 1 day to check if like the new user accounts, for example, aren't spammers. In any case, I think we're about 50% there. I think we still need a few more days to talk about this. Ani, I got a notification from you. Was that a misclick, or do you have a comment?
Yeah, so I just wanted to know if we have a time lag for that particular day, that user will still have access, is it?
Yeah, of course. I mean, more like, let's say you have some reputation and you vote on something, then that person will get the credits only like after 1 day, like especially if you're like a new account or something.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, something like that. I think we still have about 50% to go, but I'm just trying to like bring up some ideas of how we can think about this. And everything I'm saying, there's kind of a scale, as you can see, to like fully decentralized, to like, in the worst case, we can just go like registered users have like reputation of 1, and like not assume sort of this like sort of Sybil attack scenario, but actually like assume that they always have to go through the UX and they can't sort of do it with bots, and that therefore there is some cost to creating a user account. Or for example, they have to have a phone number that is verified, or they have to have a Gmail or Facebook account. I think both Gmail and Facebook require valid phone numbers. And it turns out it's not that easy to find throwaway numbers on the internet. But I think there's like 2 very discrete pathways, which is either we assume that user accounts are free and can be generated ad infinitum, like blockchain. Can generate probably 1 million private keys in 1 second. Or we assume there's some discrete cost for registering user accounts, which could either be a human cost, or now that I think about it, could even be like a proof of work cost. That's just to make just to bring some interesting ideas for you to think about and for me to think about. I never thought of that in the past. Require a small computation of a few milliseconds of a CPU to solve a proof of work puzzle to register new user accounts. I'll think about this more. And the third challenge that I see, compared to the ones we've discussed, kind of a minor challenge, but I have it here, is a small level of misincentives. So let's say you're adding a bad resource, and in this model, you are sort of not penalized for being really, really off, even with the quality, but you're sort of only rewarded, right? And you're rewarded if a lot of people confirm what you suggested. So then you might, if it's a bad resource, you might say, no, it's actually really, really good, just because you think that good resources will come up more often in search. And so there will be more people confirming, for example, your other contributions, such as the topics and the learning dependencies. Right, so the resource might be shit, excuse me, and other people might say it's a quality of 0, but they might still confirm the topics it's on that you entered. So there's a slight misincentive of raising the quality to than it actually is. But this is counteracted by the fact that you also get reputation for the quality submission. So you want that to be accurate as well. And for example, if we tweak the constants, then we can make quality be more important than topics and learning dependency, and therefore this challenge actually gets solved. So that, I think, is something that we want to finalize in the next few days. Let's say by Tuesday or Wednesday. And let's talk about one more topic real quick. So the topic is topics. In particular, the topic tree. So we're going to start off with a pre-filled topic tree that's going to be pre-filled by us, but we should allow people to change it. So we'll allow votes for restructuring knowledge tree, and let's say after 7 days the vote can end, and whoever wins gets the reputation. So that would be an example of a finite Amos game. What's another example of a finite Amos game? For example, whether it's against content standards. Or like, I guess you could have that be an unlimited Amos game. Yeah, I think that can be an unlimited one, because you don't sort of have to necessarily have like a discrete source of truth, whether something is inappropriate or not, as long as like, if more people vote that it's inappropriate than vote that it is appropriate, then you don't show it to the users. But you still allow in the future for people to say like, no, hey, this is actually appropriate. So that can actually be an unlimited, just as all the other ones can be unlimited. But when it comes to restructuring of the knowledge tree, we really, I feel like it would increase the complexity of the system too much if we have sort of a floating knowledge tree. So like we have like different versions of the knowledge tree, and then like whichever one has the most votes at any point is like the one that the algorithm uses. I feel like there should be just one source of truth on something so structural as the knowledge tree. So there could be votes, and yeah, this could be handled, and this has to be finite, and this could be handled in many ways. Like for example, because how do you solve the nothing at stake problem? So only users with a certain threshold of reputation can initiate these votes. They can initiate them like once a month, or we could do it like sort of vice versa, that there will be exactly one vote every week for how to structure the knowledge tree, and like whichever proposition gets the most votes is the one that we're going to vote on. So this is like limiting it based on time, while this is like limiting it based on a threshold of reputation. So there's various ways how to handle the nothing at stake problem here through some constraints, game theoretical constraints. Or of course, I also wrote down here the deposit and slash mechanism. So I just like to say two last things before I open the discussion up. The first one is what's going to be the first one? Oh yeah, it's just kind of a general idea that, you know, in this model, like if you think about a government, it has legislative branch, probably the most important branch. It has the executive branch, and it has the judicial branch. So in this model that I'm trying to propose, that we're trying to set up, the executive branch is code. The legislative branch is essentially us. We're right now creating the rules, or you could say more than rules, really. They're laws of our model. And finally, the judicial branch, and our goal is that we don't do that. So Facebook just does both legislation and they do judiciary. We want to use a Schelling game, or I should say an Amos game, to outsource the judiciary to the community. Separation of powers. And the last thing I wanted to say is also in the future, we could allow you to import reputation from something like Stack Exchange, Hacker News, Reddit, whatnot. This can be done very easily on the technical layer. Stack Exchange actually has an API. I believe you can log in with that API. Hacker News does not have a login API for like other sites, but I don't think it's that hard. You just require the user to post something saying like with a specific identifier, and then they do have an open API for users and for their submissions, so you can look at the latest submission, and therefore you can connect Amos profiles with Hacker News profiles. And the last one, this was actually an idea that I've had for at least a few months now, 2 months, is to also allow you to import legacy degrees. So I could import my IB diploma, and then maybe somebody with much more academic credentials could import their for example PhD diploma, and they could get credentials immediately. They could get reputation immediately. This part of the app would obviously require some intervention on the side of our company, because we don't necessarily want to publicize all of those degrees, like put them up on the internet and then have a Schelling game. So the way I'm imagining this one is kind of a centralized model where they upload their transcript. We look at it. Maybe we phone up the institution to check whether it's true. We delete the file. We give them their rep. And that was sort of the idea to also use Insolvio. So instead of like Insolvio, like our peer-to-peer credentialing system, instead of like having to submit all these learning demonstrations, like presentations or essays, and then get like rated upon them to like increase your reputation, then you could actually upload these legacy credentials and get some sort of reputation or credentials for them in our system directly. And the last thing I'm going to say, which is pretty cool, is also a concept of like, what's the relationship between our products? So like with Amos and Pruvio, the relationship is pretty clear. That's why it's the first two products we're working on. So Amos is this idea of like, let's make it really easy and personalized for people to search for things they want to learn. But part of like searching for stuff you want to learn are problems. And Pruvio is this idea of being able to check and verify a student's solution to a math or other technical problem step by step. And so, but that also requires you to know, like, first how you're going to teach the student, what content you're going to provide, what videos you're going to send him, and second of all, what problems you're going to send him. So they integrate really, really nicely. Like actually the integration is from both sides. Like in Pruvio, we'll be using Amos to find and serve the most appropriate problems with what the user already knows. With Amos, we'll be using Pruvio to like, it'll, since one of the types of resource is an exercise, then you could click, open, and it would open in Pruvio. There's also a relationship between Pruvio and Solvio, obviously. you can get credentials directly in Pruvio, and that will be what we call a centralized credential provider in the Solvio platform. And finally, there's a lot of synergy between Solvio and Amos. So how do you actually get reputation in this sense? You get it by correctly categorizing the world's learning resources. Well, if you've correctly categorized or tagged or structured a lot of learning resources, it's very likely you read them. It's very likely you know the topics they're on because you read them. And so that opens up a way to actually use Amos reputation as a credentialing system. So yeah, this is just a lot of trippy, synergetical stuff to think about. We could also separate the reputations. So we could have, the reputation could also be tree-based. It could have a number theory reputation. You could have a business reputation. But for sort of the very first version, try to keep everything as simple as possible, and let's try to expand functionality only if our users want it. So at the end of the day, we're not doing stuff to make ourselves happy. We're doing stuff to make our users happy. And that's everything from me. Do you guys have questions or comments, either in this public section of the call, or you can also talk in the private section of the call? So what's up?
So one thing about the earlier rating thing from 0 to 5.
Right.
So what if at the initial stage it's not rated? What will be shown at that point?
Good question. Well, I guess we don't have to worry about that at the moment. Why do we not have to worry about that at the moment? Because search is not enabled.
All right.
Right. In the future, how do you set the quality for something that doesn't have a quality? I don't know. I guess just have it be like like 2 out of 5.
What Stack Overflow usually has is the negative downvotes as well. So then it doesn't have to worry that. So any question will have at first 0, right? And then if it gets upvoted, then it will have some 5 votes or something. Even the questions on Reddit, it will get plus votes, plus upvotes, and if it's like too bad, then people will downvote it, and then it will have negative votes.
You mean like right. So, but does that also impact your overall reputation or karma? Like if you get a lot of negative votes on a comment or an answer or a question, does it decrease your karma? I don't think so.
I'm not sure about that. In Stack Overflow, I know it might affect the rating. At least they have a special badge if you get too many negative votes, downvotes, too many downvotes, they will have a badge. You earn that or something like that.
Got it.
I'm not sure if it's the karma.
Yeah. What do you guys think about these two concepts of number one, either having reputation be sort of ad only, or allowing it to be decreased and staked as well? And the second thing, whether we should assume that users can be registered with 0 cost, or whether we should have some cost of registering new users. And what do you think about the eventual versus strong consistency requirements? Because I'm kind of a beginner. in that orientation. Actually, there are a few people who understand this very, very well, because there's a few people that are like really into like the peer-to-peer databases.
I think reputation zero getting started point makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can keep generating reputations after a point, and yeah.
Right.
Most of the places work like that. Even Product Hunt and Reddit, Stack Overflow, they all have sort of similar models.
Right.
Product Hunt, if you're active for like I think 3 days regularly, only then you will get an option that okay, now you can put up your own products and so on.
Got it.
So that's also sort of reputation in a way.
Yeah. Cool. So I'll be thinking about this stuff in the near future, and let's get together again for Amos number 3 on, for example, Monday, or maybe a little bit later. Yeah. Let's talk on Slack. Cool. Thanks a lot for watching this video. I hope you join the Solvio community. Join us at solvio.discourse.group. See you later.